Good morning, church. My name is Jeff. I'm one of the pastors here. I'm excited to be able to share the teaching of God's Word with you. However, there's one more announcement before I get into this. This is an audible. Usually, if somebody decides that baptism is the next step in their faith journey, we'll meet with one-on-one or perhaps with me and Allie. However, today we have enough people that we're actually having a class. That said, if you have not been baptized and you are looking to Jesus to save you, this is your next step of faith. After this service at about 12:15, there's a room right behind me. I trust that you can figure that out. And if you can't, ask somebody. We're going to be doing a baptism class in there, and we'll feed you. And you don't have to reserve, just show up. Got it? All right. Now we're going to transition to a time of teaching. We're going to be in Joshua chapter 10. I'd invite you to turn in your Bibles there. I've skipped a couple of chapters, but we're going to give you context. I'm going to read the passage on which the teaching is based. This is the first half of Joshua chapter 10. This is one of those really famous stories in the Bible. This is one of those felt board kids ministry stories, but I want to challenge you to pay attention and perhaps look at this with fresh eyes, because there's a lot more going on here than maybe you thought. So let's look. This is Joshua chapter 10, verse 1. Is it dark in here? I'm going blind. All right. Now Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it, doing to Ai and its king as he had done to Jericho and its king, and that the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace with Israel and had become their allies. He and his people were very much alarmed at this, because Gibeon was an important city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were good fighters. So Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, appealed to Hoham, king of Hebron, Param, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon. Come up and help me attack Gibeon, he said, because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up positions against Gibeon and attacked it. The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, "Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us." So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you." After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road going up to Beth Horon and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon." So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky, delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. This is not the chapter we hand out to skeptics. Can you imagine getting the track out in front of a Safeway with Joshua 10 on it? This is confusing. The entire book of Joshua is loaded with something a friend of mine calls sticky wickets. You have, it looks like genocide and ethnic cleansing and all this war and violence. And so it's a very troubling book. And this can be a bit of a stumbling block for modern people reading this. In fact, if you go online, a lot of the critique of the Christian story or perhaps the Bible being the authoritative word of God, it's passages like this, where it seems like God is really angry and there's a bunch of people who die, and it looks like God actually had a hand in all of this. What are we to make of it? There's three aspects of this story we just read I want to attend to, and the first is the plea, and the second is the march, and the third is the battle. But if we attend to these three principles, you're going to see something in the book of Joshua that I promise you is not readily available. And it's almost a whisper. It's almost hanging in the margins, and we've been hearing this whisper the whole time we've been going through the book. But in this particular chapter, you're going to see some of these themes that come up again and again and again, and they're going to tell you what this passage, what this book, what this narrative is really teaching. And it's kind of elusive. So come with me real quick. We've got a holy war, we got hailstones, we've got the sun standing still, and we've got a people who entered a covenant, entered a legal agreement under false pretenses. What are we to make of this? First, the plea. Now, I have to set this up a little bit because we skipped chapter 9. Israel has conquered Jericho, they've conquered Ai, they're laying waste to the ancient Near East. They're rolling over everybody. And the whole chapter 10 begins with, interestingly enough, no Israelites. There's no Israelites. You've got some Gibeonites, and then you have 5 kings. These kings they're not NPCs. You know what an NPC is? Some of you, non-player characters. They're not extras. These are important. The narrator goes through great pains to tell us exactly who they are and where they're from twice. These are the warlords of the Canaan highlands. This is the totality of everything standing between Israel and all that God has promised them. This is it. This is the entire Op4, the oppositional force. Okay? And what happened was Gibeon is one of the more ascendant cities. We find out that it's bigger than Ai. It's wealthy. It has great fighting men. This is a very strategic place, all right? We also find out that the Gibeonites have broken ranks. They were aligned with these kings, but they broke ranks. They decided they were going to back a winner. They saw Joshua, an Israelite, running roughshod over everybody, killing everything, and they said, we're going to back a winner. So they made a deal. But here's the thing. In chapter 9, you can read about it. The deal was made under false pretenses. They did what I think I would have done. They rolled down from Gibeon to Joshua, to the Israelites, and they dressed down. They're wearing ratty old clothes, worn sandals, and they've got bread, but it's got mold. And they got some wine, but it's old and kind of vinegary, and they're like, hey, we would love to make a deal with you. And Joshua and the Israelites, this is my own inflection here, but they're like, ooh, yeah, I don't know if we want to take this city over, right? They're looking a little unseemly. I'm not sure it's worth the effort, okay? Just based on what they're bringing here. So Joshua makes a deal with them. They've pulled a ruse. They've conned him. They've got Joshua thinking that their city is of no consequence and they're poor and there's nothing strategic about it. And so Joshua enters into an agreement with the Gibeonites because of a lie. So they enter into this agreement under false pretenses, and that's not the remarkable part. The remarkable part is what happens next. Now, if you were an ancient Near Eastern warlord, I know this is something you guys think about, but if you were an ancient Near Eastern warlord and you had a major strategic city that had broken ranks, that had violated the treaty and thrown in with your enemies, what do? You act. You act with an iron fist. You bring them back, dead or alive, kicking or screaming, into the fold, and you do it quickly as a cautionary tale so that nobody else considers breaking ranks. Or else what happens? You all die. All right? That's going to be in your growth group questions. That's what you do if you're a Middle Eastern warlord. Okay. This is precisely what happens. The king of Jerusalem says to all the other kings, hey, this can't happen. This is like, I'm reading Tony Soprano into this a little bit right now. Hey, we can't let these. So that's exactly what they do. These 5 kings, they march on Gibeon, and what does Gibeon do? What do? They send word to Joshua. Now, it's very interesting. Here in verse, I think it's 9. Yep. Nope, it's verse 6. The Gibeonites sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, do not abandon your servants. Do not abandon your servants. That Hebrew word is the regular word for servants. It could mean slave, it could mean servants. It's got a bit of a lexical range. However, the term is conditioned by everything that's happened in chapter 9. Joshua has sworn an oath to Gibeon. That means that the people of Gibeon, these non-Israelites who have kind of misrepresented themselves a little bit, have entered into a covenant with God and his people. They've entered into it because of a lie. They've entered into it under false pretenses. Nevertheless, there is a covenant. And when the Gibeonites call out to Joshua, it's worth noting what they don't say. They don't say, "Come to our aid because of our astounding moral record." They don't say that. Or they also don't say, "Come to our aid because we've been so honest and upheld our side of the bargain so amazingly." They don't say any of that. Do you know what they say? Do not abandon your servants. There's something there for us. They are appealing to the covenant love of God. They're not appealing to their righteousness. They're not appealing to their record. They're not appealing to what they bring to the table. They are appealing to the covenant, contractual love of God. We have a habit of going to God in our darkest moments when we need something. And it's tempting to say, "God, look at my life. I've served you. Look at my bank account. I've given. Look at the ministries I've been involved in. Look at all the books I've read." The Gibeonites don't even try that. And this is the lesson for us. You know what they do? They call out to God and they say, "Help me. I'm yours. Help me. I belong to you." That's the pretense for their request. It is not their record. It is not what they bring to the table. It is none of that. Timothy Keller has a really, and you've heard me kind of paraphrase it one way or another. He describes it, religion, the difference between religion and the gospel, simply. He says this. He says, the definition of religion is simply this. If you obey, you'll be accepted. That's the premise of every religion, and I would argue irreligious worldviews also fall into that category. If you obey, you're accepted. The gospel is, you are accepted. Now, therefore, obey. Those seem similar. And from the outside, they might even appear similar. But do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? Because the covenant love of God is simply that it's not that you are accepted, that God has seen your resume and seen all the wonderful things you brought to the table and says, "Okay, now I'm going to put my love on your life." It's not even on the spectrum between religion and irreligion. It is something far removed from that. It is the gospel of grace, and it is revolutionary. And it was hanging in the margins of Joshua, and it was groundbreaking in the first century, and it is something that is still eye-popping and jaw-dropping, and it amazes me that modern people will read the Bible or reckon the Christian story somehow and fail to see the headline. Fail to see the gospel of grace as it's hanging in the margins of every page. It's woven into all of these great feltboard stories in the Hebrew scriptures. And you look at a book like Joshua, and people will think, "Oh my goodness, look at the miracles. He's stopping up the Jordan, and there's angels, and the sun is standing still." And we'll tend to obsess over these things. But that's not the headline. Look at the headline. The headline. Do you know what this is? This is the miracle of Rahab on a national scale. Do you recall? Rahab was a Canaanite prostitute. She was in the wrong ethnic group, the wrong track record, the wrong resume, morally bankrupt, and God's grace moves towards her. This is the exact same move on a national scale. You have non-ethnic Hebrews who've entered into an agreement on false pretenses, calling out to the God of Israel and saying, "Save us because we're yours." That's the gospel. That's grace. And that's the headline of this entire book. That's why we're teaching through it. It's hanging off the pages. It's woven through everything, all the way back from Genesis. You could go to, Moses, the Passover lamb, the Ark of the Covenant. These are all pictures of Jesus and what he would do to bring people who had no business demanding God's rescue. We have no business demanding it, but he gives it to us freely. Now, the next point I want to bring up is the march, verses 7 to 9. This is interesting. The verb tense matters here, and it's worth pointing out. And this is in the middle of the passage here. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal, verse 7. The Lord said to Joshua, in verse 8, "Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand." I have given them. I have given them. It's past tense. There's an interesting commentary on this. Fellow's name is Richard Hess, and he's written a pretty extensive commentary. The path that they had to take from Gilgal to Gibeon was 16 miles at night in the desert. No flashlights, by the way. This was a treacherous journey. This would have been, and all night they would have had to march, and they get there, it's presumably still dark, they have the element of surprise. Over and over again, the narrator makes the point. This sounds like a heroic march. This sounds like Joshua is really heading into the gap, and he's showing up, and it's kind of like this Alamo moment. They're already being attacked, and it's like Black Hawk Down. Help has to come from somewhere. The text really resists what a lot of us would expect here, that Joshua and Israel would be the hero. In fact, it goes through great pains to ensure that God ends up the hero of this. Now, the narrator wants to show us that this is God going to meet the request of people who were ethnic outsiders and who entered into this agreement under the falsest of terms. I got to imagine what I would have done in this situation where God, I would have been like, "You lied, and I don't even like you." That's what I would have done. But I want you to notice something. And this is hard because we tend to read our own emotions into these passages. We tend to, it has been said God created us in his image and we were kind enough to return the favor. I tend to think God is like me, and he's not. He's nothing like me. Thank goodness. Because he has a covenant with Gibeon, he now extends to Gibeon the same love and privilege and devotion and protection that he extends to Israel. That just because of his word and who he is, could I possibly do that? Take somebody who on paper is my enemy and then really legitimately, no, I can't do that. Love them like I would my own child? I can't do that. I'm telling you right now, not on the menu. Because my love's not perfect. When Gibeon enters into a covenant with God, even though it's on false pretenses, even though they are ethnic outsiders, even though they are liars and they don't deserve his love and his mercy, God's character and his love is such that when it comes to keeping his word to sinners, he marches through the night. That's the point. He did it with Rahab. They destroyed the whole city, and they left this one little section standing. And the entire army bent around the mercy that was destined for one family. And here you have God in the middle of the night marching to the rescue of people who have no business asking for his mercy. And this is what he's always been doing. And then finally, we got to get to the battle. This is verses 10 through 15. Let's pay attention to the verbs here. Once again, this is the Lord's battle, where he says, verse 10. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel, so Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road up to Beth Horon and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. Well, what are we to make of that passage? A couple of points to be brought out here. Modern people, they look at stuff like this and they're like, oh my gosh, God looks like a xenophobic, genocidal maniac. I didn't make that up. That was on Reddit. A couple of points. We've looked at the violence in this chapter and we've looked at some interpretive tools, but there's a real easy point to be made about this. These 5 kings were moving on a city unprovoked, and they were going to butcher everybody inside. God intervened in this particular case to stop an unmitigated, unprovoked genocide. Okay? Now, anyone reading it feels the weight of the violence, though, and that's the point. This book is supposed to be disturbing. This book is supposed to be violent. It's supposed to leave us feeling a little disgusted on the inside, because this is what happens when people violate the covenant with God. There is always a storm cloud attached to sin. There's always a blood trail behind it. Now, this chapter shows us that God will do amazing things to keep his word, to keep his promises to people who don't deserve it. And we get to the ascendant event. We get to the big event here in the sun stands still. And this is verse 12. On that day, the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel. Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, sun stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon. The sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. A couple of things to realize is this was originally part of an ancient Hebrew book of poetry. This is a line that's being quoted from another literary work that's been lost to time. But it's poetic in nature, and you should at least register that. Now, there are a lot of modern people that read this, and they think, the sun standing still? This is one of the big objections that modern people have to the Bible. They're like, okay, I like the ethical precepts, but I'm not sure I can believe the miracles. There are at least 3 ways to read this text, and all of them are defended and accepted by Christians, and at the risk of confusing you, I'm going to tell you what they are, and I'm going to tell you what I think. The first one is that it's a metaphor. This is a poetic image, and the sun didn't literally stand still. It's defensible. The other is that this really is an unbridled cosmological miracle, and the sun froze in the sky. And the other is that it's kind of like, well, it just seemed like time seemed to bend around, and it's more of a metaphorical time slowing down. I want to tell you all 3 of those are fine, and it doesn't really matter which one you think, because it's not the point. And I do want to tell you which one I think it is. You want to know? I think the sun actually stood still. I think the sun froze in the sky, and that happened to jive with what was written in this ancient Hebrew book of poetry, and the narrator, it brought it to mind. There's no other really rational explanation for the events of the text other than that. But here's the thing. Let me say this. There are a lot of modern people that look at the scriptures and they're like, I don't know if I can believe that because of all the miracles. If the tomb is empty, then it means the Bible's true. And if the tomb of Christ is empty, that means miracles are not just plausible. It means that the entirety of the story is true. Jesus says, not the least jot or tittle will be wiped away until all has been fulfilled. That means the creation story is true. God spoke the world into existence. That means the promises are true. And it's not just possible. Logically, it is probable that God would occasionally upend the laws of physics in order to see his will done. Would you agree? All right. Now, the sun stands still. Why is that important? Whether it's a fact, whether it was a cosmological miracle, whether it was hyperbole, overstatement, or poetry, doesn't really matter. And I'll tell you why. This is the extent that God goes through to keep his promises. In order to keep his promises, to a group of sinful ethnic outsiders. God intercedes on their behalf. God rouses his army in the middle of the night. You know why that's important? Let me tell you a story. I'm a pastor of a small church, so I get phone calls at all hours, and people ask me to do all kinds of weird stuff, help them move, change a tire, whatever. And if you call me, I will show up with a little bit of enthusiasm because I'm benevolent like that. I will put on my shoes, and I will show up, and I will help you, probably. If I don't have anything better going on. A couple of years ago, I got a phone call from my kid's school, my youngest, Jason. He was probably about 7 years old at the time. I don't remember what I was doing, but I was busy. And I got a phone call from the school, and they had told me that there was an accident and that I needed to come. And it involved some kind of industrial staple machine. And they didn't give me a lot of information. And so I dropped whatever I was doing. And I drove at an illegal rate of speed up to that school. And I parked in the fire zone. Oh, yeah, I did. And I got out of that car and I walked briskly with purpose through the front office, completely ignored the school secretary, walked right past her into the nurse's office, who I also completely ignored. And I walked up to my child who was there holding his hand with an ice pack with a staple sticking out of it that they saw fit to leave in there for 20 minutes. And I walked up to him and I just looked at him and I pulled that staple right out of his hand. I gave him a big hug and I completely ignored everybody. I walked out there and I took him for ice cream because that's how you do that. Now I got to tell you, when I heard that something had happened to my son, like you guys can call me with your flat tire and you got to move a piano or whatever, but when I heard something had happened to my son, there was an urgency. And when I was walking up to that school, it was almost like there was a nuclear reactor in my chest. And if there were an army of murder bots between me and him, it wouldn't have mattered. Because I love him. Because I love him. Because I would do anything to keep my promises to him. Because I love him. And the amount I love him pales in comparison to how much God loves you. And when you enter into an agreement with God, and when you say, Lord, I will follow you if I can be yours. And when you cry out to him and you say, help me, Lord, because I am yours, he comes. He comes in the middle of the night with a nuclear reactor in his chest because he loves you. He will march through the night because he loves you. He will freeze the sun in the sky because he loves you. That's the point of this passage. That's the point of the book. That's the point of all the Hebrew scriptures. God's grace always moves towards the unlikely. It always moves towards the people who don't deserve it. To the overachievers in the room, I know you're here. We have, and I am either an overachiever or an underachiever, and I vacillate between things. It depends which area of my life I'm talking about, so if this fits. To the overachievers in the room, you will think because of the way the Lord has made you, because of who you are on the inside, that you have to earn it, and that he will march through the night, and he will freeze the sun in the sky so long as you deserve it. Do you see the move? Rahab didn't deserve it. Gibeon didn't deserve it. But God will freeze the sun in the sky to keep his word to you. And his word is that he loves you. And it's not based on your performance, thank goodness. It's not based on your resume. It's not based on how much you give or how much you serve. So I'm accepted. Now I obey. Do you see? That's the gospel. Now to the besieged. If you have the warlords of Canaan at your gates, and I don't know what that looks like for you. That might look like an addiction you've been battling for a long time, and maybe one you've maybe given up on. Maybe you've conceded. Or maybe it's a diagnosis. Or maybe someone left. If you are besieged, do you see what he will do to go to you? Do you see the lengths to which he will go to keep his promises to you? Because look, what's very interesting to me is when the Hebrew word for where it says sun stand still, it's the word damam. And it has a lexical range. Like a lot of Hebrew words have a lexical range. They mean a few things. Like shalom means peace. It means hello. It means goodbye. This word has a lexical range. And one way of translating it would be still, One would be stop. One would be quiet. But essentially it means to stop your activity, to stop your doing. And Joshua calls out to the sun and he says, be still. Cease your activity. 1,500 years later, God wouldn't tell the sun to be still. He'd tell it to go out. He wouldn't freeze the sun in the sky. He would tell it to cease its activity entirely. And it means the same thing. It means the exact same thing, that he is willing to freeze the sun in the sky, to tell it to go out in order to keep his promises to you. Do you see the parallels? A people who didn't deserve it, calling on a God who had no obligation, yet he does it anyway. Why? Because he loves them, and he will charge through the night with a nuclear reactor in his chest because he loves you. This concludes the teaching of God's word.